All right, guys, it's Nick at Gutter Freedom. I had a quick question come in. Why don't we always put the downspouts on the ground? That's a really good question, and there's really like 3 reasons why that is. Number one, when your downspouts come all the way to the ground, I'm not saying that that's wrong, but sometimes, depending on where you live and how it's set up, it's a little bit better to do something more like this, to kind of make it a little higher off the ground. And the reason for that is if you live in an HOA or somewhere that has like commercial lawn service, you don't have any contact with those lawn guys, and they'll come up and they will just mash it right up either with their mower or their weed whacker. Sometimes they'll even step on them because they're not paying attention. All are very, very common. You want to be really careful of that because it'll screw up your brand new gutters. So that's the number one reason. Number two is if they're on the ground like this, it's harder to fit anything underneath of them. So you can't slide, either a plastic or concrete, little bed underneath to help protect if you have mulch, ground, loose dirt, erosion type situation. You can't fit anything underneath of it. And then the third thing is if it's not touching the ground, it's not a welcome area for, various pests, whether that's rats, ants, mice, slugs, anything. There's a million different types, but it will end up being a little more difficult if it's raised or it's off the ground in some way. And that's just our experience. I'm sure there's many other reasons to not put them on the ground, but that's kind of the big 3 we found. The other thing as well is if you do want to run an extension off of it later, if it's on the ground like this and you put the extension, it's just all here on the ground. It has no elevation to give that water a little more push through. So if it's a little higher when you attach it, it sits a little bit better. I know that picture is god awful, I'm sorry. But it sits a little higher, so it gives you a little more runoff angle to give that water force out. In case you want to add, an extension later on. Because wouldn't it make sense if that's the bottom, if it extends right here, you're up a little higher, then it'll have a drop there where the connection could go. But yeah, that didn't go as great as I had planned, so let's just forget that. But yeah, so does that make sense? So there's 4 good reasons why you don't want your downspouts directly touching the ground. You want them up a little bit to give yourself some space to protect from, weed whippers, weed whacker, lawn people, from getting crushed from neighborhood kids. If they're up a little bit, people tend not to step on them. It gives you a little extra space if you want to slide something underneath of it, whether that's a catch basin, like I said, a concrete little table to help move it out. They make little plastic trays. There's a million options. Or if you put an extender on the end and you want to control the flow, it lets you do that much easier because you have more height. And then of course, aesthetically, you don't have to worry about, erosion, mulch gets blown out. It starts creating an area where it begins to form a little canyon because that water is running away from the house right into the dirt and it erodes it all right away. So just keep those in mind when you're getting your gutters done.